Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I am talking with the beautiful Jonathan Wolff here. And I'm so excited that you are here because you work with what we call the Fascia Network or the fascia system. And so the reason that I'm calling you here or having you here with me is because I've been getting all of these messages. So I am a mystic. I have psychic abilities, and I work with the spiritual and the light bodies, as well as the physical body, with a background in personal training, yoga, as well as I'm a Reiki master in several different modalities. And so I work with the energy body as well as the physical body. And I was getting these downloads of information, and I was actually able to see the fascia network, like this amazing shining web within the body, after some sessions I was doing. And so I started to really go, okay, why is this coming up right now? And some of it I feel like has to do with the energy that we've been receiving. So, like, I don't know if you follow that, but like the electromagnetic energy from the earth, right? Then we're having these record high flares from the sun that's like wiping people out. And if you're kind of in that ascension area or timeline, if that's a timeline that you follow, like it is, we're getting these upgrades from both the earth and the sun. And so it's like our human bodies are like, what the F is happening? I don't know about you. Have you been feeling that, John?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Even today, I was like, I had to take a nap because I'm like, oh, just put me under the covers, give me my crystals, give me 10 minutes. I just needed to lay down because I was like, wow, it's coming in intensely. So so let's have you just kind of introduce yourself and start off with, what is fascia?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me on. It's really nice to be able to talk about this unique approach. Um, so yeah, the fascial system in the body is kind of a three-dimensional web of tissue that it's nonstop. It goes from head to toe, and every muscle, bone, nerve, or internal organ is invested with fascia, and it actually goes down to the cellular level. So the fascial system has a couple different components. There's some fibers that are made of elastic and collagen. Elastic kind of stretches, the collagen is a little more dense. And then there's the ground substance, which is kind of the fluid network of the fascial system. And that's the immediate environment around every cell in the body. So it's like a fiber optics communication network. It actually can relay information at light speed. With the newest electron microscope technology, they can actually see the microtubules now that are in the fascial system, and they can see that all the way down to the cellular level. So they're discovering that's kind of how our body and mind kind of can communicate. And that's kind of the main environment around every structure in the body as well.
So it literally runs from head to toe, and so what I'm hearing kind of is it takes in the information and then it disperses the information. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a fiber optic network that it's not like a one-way street. So the our consciousness is doesn't just stop at the brain. Our consciousness is kind of flowing through our fascial system, and so it's a way of communicating with the external world with energy systems, but it's also the way our body kind of communicates with itself as well. And a lot of the work, we can we find kind of trapped emotions and traumas that are kind of stuck in the fascial system. And John Barnes, who's the creator of the approach that I utilize, he always states that the fascial system is the container for our consciousness.
Oh, I love that. And that makes sense to kind of how I've been experiencing it with people, and then with my own like upgrades that I've been feeling, or after I'm in ceremony for a while, like I can kind of feel, see, and sense and I'm sensitive, so I can sense what's happening in it. I feel it almost as it's coming into my body. Whereas before it wasn't so much, but I feel like this last year has just been so intense with the energies that it's like we're upgrading whether we want to or not, right? Like it's happening. So that really makes sense. And so you talked about the approach. So what is the actual approach that you're trained in?
Yeah, well, I've been a physical therapist for 25 years, specializing in, osteopathic and orthopedic manual therapy. John Barnes is a physical therapist himself. He started creating his approach in the mid 1970s, and he has trained over, I believe he's over 100,000
Wow.
physicians and therapists that he's trained now. And it's way more than just like, hands-on therapy. His approach has three components for his approach. So there's the structural myofascial release, which I'll kind of explain each one of these. Then there's the myofascial rebounding and myofascial unwinding. The structural, it's all hands-on, but sometimes when people hear the word myofascial release, they think of deep tissue massage. And there's a system out there that's called Rolfing, which is great.
I've heard that.
It addresses the whole structure. Ida Rolf was one of the first people to talk about somato-emotional release and how traumas can get stuck in our body. But it does use a lot of force, and it's kind of painful. And it only affects 15 to 20% of that fascial system. So it's kind of missing, 80 to 85%.
And that's a big chunk.
Yeah, that's a pretty big chunk. That's kind of what John Barnes's approach is all about. It's a manual therapy. It is gentle. When we start a technique, we sink into the body. We take up the slack in the tissues till we find a barrier, and then we wait. So we apply gentle, sustained pressure into the barriers of the fascial system. And most techniques anymore, we're holding for minimum 5 minutes. And that's where we get the change in that 80 to 85% of the fascial system is through that gentle, sustained pressure. And then we've got techniques from head to toe. We work on the craniosacral system, which is the deepest layer of fascia around the dura mater, which surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. So we have techniques to work all 3 layers of the fascial system. Myofascial rebounding is very interesting. I'm not sure where he got that from. Hopefully I'm doing more training with rebounding this summer. But what I have been trained in so far is we put our hands somewhere on the body, and we start a very slow, rhythmical, oscillatory movement that builds. And as we build up that amplitude and the intensity of it, we create a fluid dynamic wave throughout the entire body. And it helps to take that ground substance, that liquid environment of the fascial system. It hardens after trauma, inflammation, poor posture. It kind of solidifies. And that's what puts all the crushing pressure on all the structures in the body. So the sustained part of the structural work, in addition to the rebounding, is how we're able to soften that kind of fluid environment back to a glide slide system.
Yeah, I could feel that when you were saying that, how, that rhythmic motion, and like on kind of a spiritual and like a feeling that safety and comfort in the body when you're, releasing those emotions or whatever may be trapped there. It's like as you're saying, it was like that rhythm of being in the womb almost, or like that rhythm of gently being rocked or nurtured to like safely release. So that's kind of just my impression as you were saying that. It just felt like that's a really intuitive approach to slowly open in a really nurturing way for people.
Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on.
That was really good. Like, I want to try it.
Yeah. And yeah, it sometimes our holding patterns, we're bracing on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
And it could be, suppressed trauma, it could be, suppressed either physical or emotional trauma. And sometimes that's part of that fight or flight or freeze kind of response. And then all of a sudden our fascial system is hardening and tensing at the same time. And sometimes that's at a subconscious level. And so the rebounding definitely, you know, John Barnes always said in seminars that we're encouraging people to let go. You know, I give myself permission to let go. And the rebounding is really good at finding those subconscious bracing and holding patterns. And a lot of times during, like in the seminars, when we're doing rebounding, there's somato-emotional releases taking place all over the room. So it's another way to get into that kind of somato-emotional release in addition to addressing the tissues.
And that's so powerful right now. I think that like what I, feel and see in the world is like so many people are suffering from heartbreak and the woundings and, the shadows that we see playing out in the world around us. It's like we're all searching for our own love. We're all searching for that love of the universe. And so when we can actually soften into that experience to let go, that's huge. That's powerful. And I think sometimes it just takes us to kind of get to that edge to finally accept and be like, okay, I need to try this other approach along with all the other approaches, talk therapy, yoga, like whatever else that you're doing to take care of yourself and to work through woundings and trauma, whether it be a bigger trauma or something that, might seem minute, but is still being carried within the body. It's so important right now to have this. And so I now I see why the universe is like, yeah, let's talk, because it goes with what I'm already doing. So I love that. So go ahead with the next approach.
Yeah. The third part of his approach is the unwinding. And sometimes we just get people, sometimes we'll just set people up and we'll put a hand lightly on the top of the head, maybe a hand on the shoulder. And no matter what kind of technique we're using, we're encouraging people to drop within themselves, to center, to do deep breathing, to let go, to soften. And if people are able to take off their brakes, so to speak, all of a sudden the mind and the spirit of the body starts a movement pattern. And we're never taking people into any specific movement. We're following what their body wants to do.
Yes.
And for anyone that's been in like some kind of a traumatic event where their body has gone through space in a way that is, not necessarily natural. Sometimes when people are really taking off their brakes, their body is going through the positions that they went through during their traumatic event.
So it could be like you're saying, for an example, would be like a car accident where they're hurled out of the vehicle or something like that. And so their body could literally be reliving that because we have the muscle memory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That tissue memory, you bet. And other times it's just the body's kind of innate intelligence that knows exactly what position to put the body in three-dimensional space to allow it to release. So the unwinding, sometimes we intentionally try to initiate unwinding. Other unwindings will happen during the structural work or the rebounding. It just kind of spontaneously starts happening. So that's kind of the three corners of his approach. So it's very in depth, and there are over a dozen different seminars for different areas of the body. I've only taken 5 seminars so far. I hope to take them all with multiple repeats because this is my new thing. After just doing traditional physical therapy and finding that it would have its limits, we can only get so far. It makes sense now. We're only affecting 15-20% of the system and never addressing emotions or the mind. I'm a Tai Chi instructor as well, and that is mind, body, spirit. And I think John Barnes' approach is the exact same thing. It's a mind, body, spirit approach.
And I think that so many people are starting to remember that, like you said, it's not just the mind. Yes, some therapies are going to be helpful, but it really is a holistic a holistic approach, and that we are so multidimensional, and our bodies are literally like supercomputers. And so when we can come back to that, like, because what I see in the visions that I receive sometimes is like, we have to do this internal work. We have to start clearing not only our own trauma, but it also goes into, like, our ancestral karma and trauma that we're carrying. The epigenetics, they've done testing that we carry those epigenetics. There's even some testing that has discovered, while we're in the womb, we're receiving information from our mothers. And so we really can carry those imprints. And so we need to, really work on this holistic and whole approach to work through it all. Because what I see is that as we do that, then what happens is our actual gifts. So this would be, maybe it is, telepathy, or this is kind of getting out there. I don't know what your people are into, but I'm all woo. So it all goes together. It all goes together. So our gifts, or what they call like the Siddhic power. So whether that be bilocation through meditation, or maybe that be clairvoyance or clairaudience, which is being able, to see and to hear, or maybe that's, having a deeper empathy for others, or being able to communicate with your animals. Like, there's so many things that our bodies are holding. And when we can actually move through the wounding and the trauma and the imprints and start to clear those, then we open up to actually receiving all of our own codes, right? And we open up this way that we can really be our full, authentic, divine, human, angel selves. Because like in a lot of the communities, the spiritual communities, everybody wants to be activated, but they don't always want to do that internal work. And they're like, well, why aren't my gifts opening? And sometimes, not always, but sometimes it could be because of those imprints, because of what the body's holding on to, that resistance, that, gripping, that control, or whatever it could be. Like, we have to learn to open, we have to learn to release. And when we can do that, that's when we're giving permission for spirit to move through us, right? That's when we're becoming our divinity. We're allowing it to move. And so I love everything you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, every human being that's walking on the planet has fascial restrictions, and therefore it's going to now limit the body's natural ability to move and flow. I'm also a Reiki master too, so I love woo.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of doing some combined treatments with some of my clients, where I'm doing structural myofascial release, but I'm working over the central chakras in the body, and doing some Kundalini Reiki during the hands-on treatment. And yeah, people are they can feel energy flowing throughout their entire body. We're helping to release myofascial restrictions in those areas. And it's interesting, all the areas of the chakras pretty much correspond with where there are common fascial restrictions in all human beings. And
wow.
So it's interesting to really kind of combine these two modalities. And yeah, they go hand in hand. So yeah, I kind of like the woo as well.
Cool.
that was nothing I could really ever do in traditional therapy settings. So it's really nice to run my own practice and be able to combine these different modalities.
Yeah, and it sounded kind of like when you were talking about the rebounding and the unwinding, there's already an intuitive approach a little bit there, right? Because you have to listen, and you have to wait, and you have to honor and respect the body, and feel into that as it wants to release, so you're kind of like communicating in this very subtle way. And so when you add the energetics with it, then you have that, healing that goes with it. And anytime you do Reiki, of course, that heightens your own intuition. So then you get more of those impressions, and you can communicate even deeper with the body, and with, maybe it's their guides, or maybe it's, something else, however you communicate with a person's energy centers. But yeah, that can definitely heighten. So yeah, I could see how that could go really, really well together, because I do reflexology. And so like I got to listen to those points, you know, on the feet and stuff. And I'm like, and sometimes it's like it will have a little release, or I'll just touch it and it's like a complete void and it pulls away from me. But honestly, my finger, it's still there, but energetically I can feel that, right? I can feel that. And so then I know like the organ, where is this located? What's going on? And I get other impressions from that. So I think the energy healing and those other modalities work so well.
Yeah.
So, how does the work that you do like help people? Like if they came in for a treatment, what are some of the common things that people come see you for? Whether it be woo or be very physical or emotional, like.
Yeah. I would say the majority of the people that I see have struggled with chronic pain. There's even the concept of unexplained pain, where they've had all the they've had all the tests, they've seen all the specialists, and they don't know why they're hurting. And I'd say the majority of the people I've worked with have done pretty much, you know, all the things that are out there and only had temporary or short-lived results. So I do treat the entire body. So I've treated people with headaches and migraines, whiplash, you know, shoulder, spine, hip, knee, foot, and ankle troubles. We can treat some neurological conditions because we can get down into that deepest layer that wraps around the brain and the spinal cord. So I think it's effective at treating certain central nervous system dysfunctions. Myself, I was able to get rid of my chronic migraines through John Barnes' myofascial release and craniosacral therapy. And
that's amazing.
I've been able to help some other people with that as well. And yeah, I do have some clients that definitely are into the energy work. And sometimes I do offer a separate Reiki session, and I've got some, you know, I've got some of the Tibetan crystal sound bowls. And so I've got a set of 7. So I'll go through and tune the 7, you know, chakras, and then I'll play a bowl for each kind of level. And so, yeah, I've got some clients that they just kind of want to come in for an energy treatment. Other times I'm kind of combining everything. And if I kind of know, if I've asked someone and they're kind of not really open to the Reiki, that's totally fine. You know, I don't have to do that. So yeah, I work on a little bit of everything. I haven't had too many kids yet, but I know it's effective for certain pediatric dysfunction. Even, you know, even babies and infants that had a traumatic birthing process, we can kind of facilitate that unwinding process that maybe the baby wasn't able to go through. So yeah, I haven't really turned anyone away yet. I think I've had some clients that have told me, you know, their chronic internal organ problems have cleared up. You know, so I think it treats chronic inflammation, chronic pain. And yeah, it seems to be a very, very effective approach.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those people that are watching, what are some simple things that they could do to communicate with their own fascia, or maybe even just, you know, get to know it, communicate with it, or maybe even just helping them kind of shift energy?
Yeah. I would recommend, there is a book that's called Comprehensive Myofascial Self-Treatment. And it's The Path to Authentic Healing and Pain Relief. The author is Joyce Karnis, Karnis. She's a physical therapist and a John Barnes trained MFR specialist. And her entire book, you know, goes through an introduction. She talks about MFR. She talks about fascia, fascial restrictions. She goes through some mind-body activities, and then a little chat about myofascial stretching. And then there's self-treatment components, lower body, upper body, cranial dural system, women's and men's issues. And then she goes through a chapter on how to use certain equipment that's available to the public, and how to use some of that equipment to help get into the fascial system. She talks a little bit about unwinding, some self-rebounding. They call it jiggling.
Yeah, because
So yeah,
I've seen that, like just the jumping up and down on your toes or whatever. Like sometimes that can be very grounding for us too, like to kind of shake the
yeah,
energy, but that
yeah,
could actually affect the fascia.
yeah, definitely. That's a way to kind of do self-rebounding. So yeah, that book, I reference a lot of my clients to that book. That was something I picked up at some of the seminars down in Sedona. Um, and yeah, otherwise, if people are just doing a traditional stretch, the idea is that if we're in a comfortable position, we need to hold that stretch for 4 to 5 minutes to really get into that fascial system. And it's not how hard you're stretching, it's how long you're holding it for. So if people are familiar with, certain types of yoga and they get into a pose, if they're able to do it, then they're holding it for at least 4 to 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
that's what's getting into that fascial system that much more.
Yeah, so that reminds me of like I teach restorative and yin yoga, which is very slow. Restorative, you hold the pose, maybe in an hour class, you might do 8 to 10 poses because you're really sinking into it. And so it's almost like having that intention before you do it. If you want to work with that fascia network, is as you're holding it, like wait for, almost like what I feel is like you drop into the body, you allow your mind to soften and quiet as best as possible. I mean, that doesn't always happen, but and then set that intention and almost like build that intuitive approach to feel your own fascia moving. Does that make sense? Like having it, I don't know. I feel like I could maybe do that if I actually sat with it and communicated and just said release, and maybe they could feel that too. Maybe not. But I feel like that's
Yeah,
something I might be able to actually do on my own, is to hold those poses and say, hey, when you're ready, I'm gonna hold this and let's just move and release together.
yeah. During treatments, I'm always, directing people to bring their focus into their body.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. If we can, what John Barnes calls it, channel 5 and channel 3. Channel 5 is left brain, is trying to figure everything out, is go go go, linear, logical. That's where most of us are stuck. Channel 3 then is our right brain, is our emotional intelligence, is feeling, observing, and so we're always talking to people about channel 5 and channel 3. And if we can shut that left brain down and we can get into channel 3, then we can bring all our awareness into our body, and people can definitely feel where I'm working on a fascial restriction. And when the fascial system releases, it's like those big taffy machines at the fair that are moving like a big piece of taffy. So it's that slow stretching of like a big piece of taffy. Other times it just feels like melting. So something that would be solid, sometimes they say like a stick of butter that we're taking out of the freezer, and then slowly it's coming to room temperature and it's just slowly melting and softening. So yeah, people can definitely, once they get out of that left brain chatter and they really bring all their awareness into their entire body and feel where the fascial system is being, stretched, so to speak, then they can breathe into that. The deep breathing also encourages fascial release, kind of activates that parasympathetic system, which is opposite of our fight or flight. And yeah, we can visualize that softening, that melting. It's always very subtle. It's not going to be something where people are like, holy cow, something just, released. I could feel like 5 inches of lengthening. It's always a really subtle, it's always a very subtle thing. But I think if people stick with it and they keep tuning into their bodies, I know it can take, maybe 4 to 5 sessions sometimes here in my office. And people, once I'm done with the technique, they'll be like, wow, that was a really big release there. And I was like, yep, you're right. Because we get certain sensations in our hands too when we're receiving, signals from the body. We'll get like pulsing in our hands, we'll get a
Yep.
heat buildup, and then wherever I've got the system on tension, I'll feel that melting, I'll feel that taffy stretching. And people can definitely feel that after they've been exposed to it, a number of times.
That's awesome. It's kind of like building that muscle memory again, right? Like they're like waiting for that release, like, oh, I kind of remember that experience. Let's try that again.
Hmm.
Oh, I love it. So I kind of had a question too. So like, the foam rollers and things like that, does that also affect the fascia system? I mean, I'm assuming it does. It's not as in depth, but is that something that people could do at home?
Yeah, there is a foam roller section in that comprehensive myofascial self-treatment book. I think most of the time foam rollers aren't being used the right way. So say you've got someone that wants to work on their, the outside of their thigh, this IT band,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of get onto the ground and they get like in a side plank position, and then they're rolling their body and their leg back and forth on that roller, which that makes sense. Like it's called a foam roller. So most people think, okay, I should be rolling back and forth on this thing. Again, only getting into that elastic component, only 15 to 20% of the system. And if there's a lot of myofascial restriction, trigger points in that muscle, rolling over those spots over and over, nothing's going to release. If nothing else, it's going to actually make things tighten up and brace harder. So foam rolls can definitely be used, but instead of rolling on them, we would have people locate a tender spot. Anything that's hot, hard, or tender is the sign of tissue in distress. And then we would apply gentle pressure, maybe not full body weight, but figuring out a way to put gentle pressure into that area. And then again, 4 to 5 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes of just letting the body melt and soften over that foam roll. So I think there's different ways that foam rollers can be used, and some of that rolling might be good for like recovery, like after working out. Maybe
Yep.
you have developed some muscle knots that it would be of benefit to kind of roll over those and work those out. But to get into the rest of the fascial system, it's got to be more gentle and it's got to be that long sustained hold.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. So, um, how can people find you? Where are you located? Um, and what are you offering? I mean, you kind of already said it. You have that, and you have your integrative, you have your sound. But tell us a little bit more about where you're at and your business.
Yeah, so I'm in Waverly, Iowa. I opened up Wolffpack Wellness last year in August, and I'm just a block off the main downtown area here in Waverly. People can find me online. I've got a website, wolffpackwellness.com. Wolff has two F's. That's my last name, has two F's.
Okay.
I've got a Facebook business page. I'm on Google. People can call me. I do a lot of free consultations here in the office. So people can always call me. They can set up those appointments. I've got online booking as well. And I've got a little bit of information on my website, but I tried not to throw too much information at people.
Yeah.
But anyone that's interested, I'm happy to talk about all the in-depth things of this approach. So yeah, I think those are all the different ways to find me. I'm mainly I'm just doing John Barnes myofascial release. I still utilize a lot of my osteopathic and orthopedic manual therapy. John Barnes will be the first person to say, don't stop doing all those other things. Those things are great and they work. It's just add in this myofascial component. And sure enough, I'm getting longer lasting results that are more permanent by adding in his approach to all the other traditional manual therapies. So if people, I do teach people self-care items. I don't really prescribe home exercise programs like I did in traditional setting, but if I find a restricted muscle, I'll show people ways to release that muscle with a myofascial approach, and then usually following up with maybe a stretch. But yeah, people don't come out of here with like a 20 to 30 exercises that they've got to work on. I try to stick with like 2 or 3 kind of main things based on what we find and what the troubles they're having. So yeah, I do 60-minute sessions. It's all hands-on. And yeah, I combine John Barnes's approach. I integrate some other soft tissue mobilization approaches, osteopathic techniques for the spine, and yeah, just kind of have a nice, well-rounded, kind of holistic approach to treating the human structure. And then yeah, if people are into the energy work, I offer Kundalini Reiki sessions. And I don't really say that I don't do like sound baths. I'm not doing sound healing. But I'm a percussionist, and when I've been to some sound baths, and I just really like that sound component. So I don't do like sound healing or sound baths, but I incorporate the crystal bowls into my Reiki sessions, and it just gives kind of people something auditory to kind of focus on, and it seems to bring another kind of dimension to the Reiki work.
It really does. I kind of am the same way when it's my sessions. They're very intuitive. So sometimes I'm like breaking out crystals. Sometimes I'm using essential oils. Sometimes I like have a glass crystal pyramid that I use, and then also my rain stick. And so it's like whatever I need to break up. If I need those tools, they're there. But every session's a little bit different. So it sounds like you're also taking that intuitive approach to what you feel like they need in that moment.
Yeah, and that's what John Barnes always says too, with his approach, with this hands-on therapy, that we're never going into a session knowing what we're going to do. It's he always says, if you go into a room knowing what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. and so it is, you're going to do a general, structural analysis, looking at people standing, how gravity kind of distorts their three-dimensional framework. We'll do a little bit of tissue palpation and assessment, but then from there, one technique kind of leads into the next, and we're always working on balancing the pelvis. That's like a cornerstone to his whole approach. Is no matter if we're treating headaches or plantar fasciitis or anything in between, he teaches us how to assess and balance the pelvis, because that's the foundation for the entire structure.
Oh, I love you brought that up, because and like for having a yoga background, like we hold so much emotion in our pelvis. And then also I do womb healing, so I work with healing of the energetics of the womb. And so I love that you say that, because it really is like yes, our heart and our solar plexus are like power centers, but so is the pelvis. Like that holds so much, and it really does. It connects everything. It connects the upper and lower. So yeah, I can see that. Now my mind is going. I'm like,
and the psoas muscle is a big one too. It's actually a back muscle, but we access it through the abdomen. So we always talk about, we've got a back, a side back, and a front back. And that psoas muscle attaches to every low back vertebrae, every disc, all the lymphatic system, blood flow and nerve flow to the legs goes through that area. And that psoas muscle, for whatever reason, seems to hold an incredible amount of emotion.
wow.
And so, in addition to like the second energy ray, the sacral chakra, that psoas muscle is right there, and then that's also the Kundalini kind of energy is right there too. So, yeah, we've got a lot of techniques to kind of work the pelvic floor, diaphragm, transverse plane area, the abdominal diaphragm, everything in between. Got a lot of abdominal techniques, and yeah, balancing the pelvis and working. There's so many muscles that attach to the pelvis, and then a lot of times, then how our appointments and treatments are also kind of intuitive, is that we're feeling under our hands, we're feeling what's going on between our hands, but then we're feeling into the body beyond our hands. And sometimes I'm going with the tissues, and then all of a sudden I feel, if I'm like on a leg, I'll feel something pulling up towards someone's shoulder. And then when we're done with that technique, I'll go look at their shoulder, and there's a vasomotor response. Their shoulder's really bright red and it's warm. And that's the fascial voice. That's the body giving us clues that what we were just doing is connected to a fascial restriction in that area.
Wow.
And so that's where there's no protocol. It's, you go in, you do a little bit of assessment to get a starting point. John always says, just find something hot, hard, or tender, and start and go to work. Then just adding in the physical therapy assessment and the osteopathic assessment just gives me more layers to then apply his approach. But yeah, we get a lot of those vasomotor responses. People will also feel that. They're like, why is my foot buzzing right now? We're working on my, abdomen. And sure enough, there's a restriction, down into that area.
And that just goes to show that our body is all the way connected. Everything is connected. And so for, humanity to come back to that remembrance that we are all one, we are all whole, like everything is connected. And I love that you said the voice of the fascia. That like lit up with me, because it's like, yes, we can communicate with our body, our systems, our organs, and we just have to kind of train ourselves, right, to listen. Yeah.
Get out of that channel 5.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, and I'm going to make sure to put your information and your bio down below. So if you're interested in reaching out, make sure you do that. Let us know in the comments what you guys thought. If you've ever experienced a myofascial release, and just let us know what you guys are thinking. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining. It was amazing. And I need to get up there. I think Waverly is only like maybe 2.5 hours from me. I don't know. Maybe
I'm not quite sure where you're at, but yeah, we're kind of in northeast Iowa, just north of Cedar Falls, Waterloo.
I'm about 45 minutes. What direction? East, west of Cedar Rapids.
Okay.
So I'm a little farther down, but so maybe like 2 hours.
Yeah. I think that'd probably be within 2 hours. Yeah.
Well, I need one because I know my IT bands they've been screaming for a while. They got the little bumps on them. I'm like, oh.
And just like to throw one more thing in that, this approach, it's never a quick fix, like a lot of things, it takes time. Most of us have layer upon layer upon layer of fascial restriction. So I always encourage people to, usually try a minimum six sessions, depending on how long people have been having their troubles. Sometimes I'm starting off with recommending up to 30 sessions, and then we're just kind of seeing how things progress. And it's a tapered approach, meaning we usually start, a couple times a week. Maybe we do that for 4 to 6 weeks, but then eventually we're tapering off. We're going down to once a week. We're going down to once every other week. We're going down to once a month. And that's usually when we get people at the prevention and maintenance stages, when we're just kind of doing like once a month. But people can always come in. People can always come in just for one session. I just always let people know right up front, let go of any expectation, let go of any specific outcome, because one session is just literally barely the tip of the iceberg. But it gives people a chance to come in and experience this work. And some people actually get a pretty decent result with one treatment, but it's nothing I ever kind of guarantee. But you can always come in and receive a treatment and kind of experience what this treatment is like. It's different. It is different from everything else that's out there. And I think coming in and experiencing it is kind of the most important thing. You gotta come in and kind of feel it. And I think it's the best way.
And I think something else that you said too, is it's not like a quick fix. And I think that our society has been like conditioned to want everything right now, like pop a pill, do this. But, when it comes to our bodies and it comes to our well-being, like it is going to take time, it takes time to reconnect, to revisit, to remember, to embrace. Like it's a process. It is a journey, right? It's a journey. There's never a destination. Like it's always a journey. And so to be able to embrace that and understand that, we're trying to move away from those quick magic pill fixes. We're trying to take responsibility for our own healing journeys, and we need people like you and like me and like others that are doing this work that are like, we're in it for the long haul. We're not here. It's not a quick fix. Like we want people to feel and know and understand their own body networks so they can be proactive in their own healing experience. We're healers, but really we're just assisting them into healing, right?
Yeah, we're facilitators of healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because we all do it. We all want quick fixes. I mean,
yeah, sure.
I want the remote to work right away. I want my body to work right away, but it doesn't happen like that, especially when we journey into the mystery of the body. It's like, okay, this is connected to everything. So, well, I'm so glad that you're here, and I can't wait to have this air. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.